psychedelics first enter your life? And how has that evolved over time?
How did psychedelics enter my life? Well, I think I was maybe a late bloomer. My first psychedelic trip was actually after college. And yeah, a friend of mine asked if I wanted to do acid and go to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. So that's what we did. And yeah, actually, it's interesting because my first trip wasn't like crazy overwhelming, but the world just seemed more interesting. Although I certainly had trips later on that were overwhelming. But yeah, I continued using psychedelics personally in like festivals and that kind of thing over the next few years. Um, and then well, eventually, at the time I was working as an engineer, and eventually my psychedelic experiences and other things too, but certainly a lot of influence from psychedelic experiences led me to, yeah, leave that path and go down a different path. Um, yeah.
What happened next? How did you move into more active involvement in the field?
Yeah. So, in short, I quit my job and took a one-way flight to India. And I spent the next 15 months backpacking around India and Southeast Asia, Thailand a lot and other parts of Southeast Asia. And yeah, I was unlearning a lot of things during that time period. And ultimately, I came back home to the States, to Baltimore, my hometown. And I was thinking this is now, it's early 2015 at this point, and I'm thinking like, okay, well, what's next? I don't want to go back to um, the same career trajectory that I had been on. Um, and I want to do something I'm passionate about. And then it kind of hit me in the face like, oh, I know what I'm passionate about. And so these things that help change my life. So that was when I started psychedelic seminars. And so psychedelic seminars, yeah, so I started it in Baltimore in 2015. And it began, the first event I held was I rented a library room and I was talking to six people about my ayahuasca trip in Peru that helped lead me to like quit my job and go on this journey and everything. And I was, organizing every month a different event with a different speaker. Eventually, I was having folks that were Johns Hopkins researchers, right there in our backyard in Baltimore, conveniently, coming as guest speakers. And so the project grew over time. I got involved in several other different projects along the way in the psychedelic space. I eventually moved to California, and the community I had started in Baltimore became what's now the Baltimore Psychedelic Society. And I helped seed many other groups of this type in different places around the world. Helped the Washington, D.C. Psychedelic Society get started, helped the SF Society get restarted. I also helped a couple groups in Portugal get started, a few in Portugal. Not all are still active anymore, but I did help some groups at several points in Porto and Lisbon and the Algarve get started. I've been to Portugal a few times. um, so yeah, and along the way, I was producing events under psychedelic seminars of increasing scale and conferences and everything. And then meanwhile, this Global Psychedelic Society network continued to grow. So the Global Psychedelic Society is a network connecting these local psychedelic societies around the world that are providing different forms of education, community events. And it was at the Beyond Psychedelics conference in Prague in 2016 where we had the first gathering of psychedelic society leaders from different countries around the world. And that was where the Global Psychedelic Society Network really was started. And it was a very informal network for many years, um, not even public facing at all, just kind of as a network behind the scenes of these society leaders. And then, over the last couple of years, things really just like things took off. And well, I guess I can go back to 2020 was one of the big pivots where, um, you know, in that time of like COVID, one of the opportunities was to create online meetings of people from different places because people weren't as physically doing things. So that was when we started our holding bi-weekly Zoom meetings for leaders from different places to come together. And that eventually led to the GPS, actually a whole team forming and then becoming a public facing presence. And the whole project has grown and evolved a lot from where it started 10 years ago. And so we continue to this day with the Global Psychedelic Society, connecting the different leaders of different psychedelic societies from around the world. And yeah, and excitingly, we're going to be holding a retreat in northern Portugal later this year for leaders of psychedelic societies, which I'm very excited about, to gather in person for a few days with all these folks.
What's the role of psychedelic societies, and why are they important?
Yeah. Um, so what is a psychedelic society? And the way we've kind of defined it is basically any organization that's holding regularly occurring psychedelic education and community events. And those events take many different forms. Some groups are they might have speakers that are experts, researchers or authors or subject matter experts. Sometimes the events might be psychedelic integration circles. Sometimes they could just be a potluck of people getting together who are interested. But the thing we're looking for, different groups do different things, and different places require different things. Every country is different, every culture is different, and so local leaders are doing what's fit for purpose for their communities. But what we're looking for, as far as like who do we consider to be a psychedelic society, is are you holding some kind of regularly occurring community event, more than just like an annual conference, but you're gathering community on a regular basis, whether or not you use the name psychedelic society in the title of your organization. But we basically, who we're serving is those community builders. And yeah, why is this important? That's a great question. So the reason this is so important is, well, I start with the vision of the post-prohibition future. And that's always my starting point. That's the goal here, right? And beyond that, of course, you can talk about collective liberation more broadly. But the slice of that pie, and I think it's all very interconnected. But if we look at the slice of the pie of ending prohibition, right? Can we do that? Can we achieve that goal? Can we live in a world where people have freedom over their own consciousness, where we don't use incarceration to try to influence behavior? And in Portugal, you've of course come a lot further along in that route than most places in the world. I think there's critiques of the Portuguese system in different ways too. But I think Portugal is certainly a model that is like way far ahead of the curve from most places. And so what does the post-prohibition framework look like? And to me, that world fundamentally is going to need education and community. And because the world that I'm interested in is one where there is psychedelic therapy available, but psychedelics are being experienced not only in the limited container of therapy, but maybe you have, there's of course indigenous models, there's recreational models, there's a plurality of approaches and ways. Maybe it's just microdosing and walking in the woods with your friends. There's so many different ways that people can experience psychedelics, and I think they're all valid, right? And they all carry different benefits and risks, and people need to be informed about the benefits and risks of all of this. But in this post-prohibition world of my dreams, where's the place you go to learn about psychedelics? It's not necessarily the first stop. The first stop is not necessarily going to be a waiting room in a doctor's office. And I don't know that that's like the dream, right? But to me, it's the community. You would have, and the future version of a lot of these psychedelic societies, the leveled up version, right? I see them as being very, just very resourced and very thorough resources. So people know, like, I can go to this group, I can find peers, I can find elders, I can find information, I can find what I need, and be equipped to make good decisions. And so that's where I think these community organizations are actually essential. If we're, at least in terms of creating this vision of the future, it fundamentally is predicated on having this type of community education infrastructure.